Music. We are live from the Big Easy, New Orleans. Let it be known, James Wright has joined us as well. Good to see you, James.
Good to see you. I hope you're having fun in the Big Easy.
Yeah, it's, you know what, James? Right now, there's no better place to be. The National Newspaper Publicists Association is celebrating the 195th anniversary of the Black Press of America. So, who wouldn't want to be here?
That's right. That's right.
James, lots going on this week, and we'll get to all of that a little bit later in the show, particularly what's going on here at this beautiful, beautiful Hilton Riverside Hotel. But first and foremost, James, the January 6th hearings took place again yesterday. This time focusing on Republicans who aided, or at least was approach by the Trump administration and their attempt to overturn the 2020 election.
Well,
As we
as
see our
we per-
producer on the screen. Oh, shit.
as we peruse through these hearings, it's interesting to note that people are really becoming forthcoming and talking about what's really going on in terms of those days after Biden's victory in 2020, about the telephone calls that the former president made to state officials trying to find 11,000 votes, whoever heard of that, and trying to talk to people in Arizona about overturning the election with a different set of electors, even though the parties have a right to do what they're doing. And so, what we're getting a look into is really, and people don't want to put it this way, Stacey, but we're looking at undermining of democracy. And this has got to be fascinating, but it can be horrifying because if we continue on this track, who knows where this can lead?
Right, right. And James, the situation in Georgia, the Secretary of State there really, um, he and the House Speaker in Arizona really told some compelling stories about the pressure the Trump administration, Trump himself. They didn't say just uh, the players, but they said Trump himself called them and told them about these fake set of electors and pressured them to change. And in fact, the Secretary of State, I'm sorry, the House Speaker in Arizona talked about threats being made. There were protests outside of his home. He was worried about his daughter, who was ill at the time. It was a lot of pressure there from Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani as well.
Well, let me make a little side comment here. Most people who lose presidential elections, even if they're a president and they lose the election, they're disheartened, but they're glad to get out of Washington. They're glad to get out of Washington and get home so they can be with their families, so they can build their libraries and they can start their other projects. Apparently, that's not Donald Trump's agenda. He wanted to make sure that he stayed in power and he went to these extra legal, I would say, measures in order to do that and used Rudy Giuliani, who almost became our attorney general at one point, in order to do this. This is dangerous because it is breaking precedent. When a person loses the presidency, they concede and they move on. And
Right.
that's what everybody has done. But apparently, Donald Trump has not done so, and he wants to maintain power. I think that these hearings have got to get to a point, Stacey, where they have to become so serious that criminal charges need to be leveled against our ex-president as well as his minions. And I mean that criminal charges need to be lodged against him. And I know you can't do that against a sitting president, but he is no longer a sitting president. So we need to do that in terms of his conduct.
Well, James, you know, you talk about smoking guns. There's plenty of smoking guns here. The big question really is we're talking about January 6th. We're talking about this committee. We, the big question is where's the handcuffs for former President Donald Trump?
Well, he has to go through this thing called due process, and he should be able to do that. Due process is afforded to everyone in the United States, including Donald Trump, and that's why it's important that these hearings are thorough. They're thorough, they're accurate, So when it comes time for the Justice Department to do what it's supposed to do and file charges against the ex-president and his minions, such as Rudy Giuliani, they have evidence to back that up, and they're not doing that based on a political agenda or political innuendo. The key is not to convince Stacey, not to convince folks like you and me who know he's guilty, and not to convince Trump's people, is to convince the American people, particularly the independent voters, that this was a fair process, it was a thorough process, and it needed to be done in order to preserve our democracy.
Well, you talk about evidence and you talk about our thoughts on it, but the most important thing is Representative Benny Thomas has really put together what appears to be the most airtight case against the former president that anybody, Merrick Garland hasn't done it. No one else has done it. What they're doing in New York, apparently there was some district attorneys in New York or assistant district attorneys in New York who felt that there was enough evidence to charge Trump criminally on other matters. You have the situation in Georgia. He has not yet faced prosecutors there. But what Benny Thompson has done here is probably perhaps the most incredible job of presenting the case, perhaps in American history. I mean, this really, I'm hearing many are saying that Watergate pales in comparison to what Donald Trump did on
Yes.
January 6th.
Yes, without a doubt, Watergate is is sort of like minor league in reference to Major League Baseball here, and that's very disturbing because I thought that we as a country learned something from Watergate, that the president is not above the law, and that we need to keep that in check. The system did not work at that particular time. In terms of Congressman Thompson, keep in mind that not only is he running this particular committee, he also he's chair of the Homeland Security
Right.
committee in the House. So he has been very, very busy. He's handled both of those responsibilities very well. And one of the things I like about him is that he's his calm, cool demeanor in terms of questioning witnesses in order to maintaining order. He's not banging his gavel and calling into power. And he is working very well with Lynn Cheney, who, by the way, he has many political differences with in terms of issues. So that just shows you that he has really elevated himself to the level of statesman, and that is what we need now, statesmanship.
Yeah, again, we are live in New Orleans, at the site of the National Newspaper Publicists Association's annual convention. But this year is extremely special, the 195th year of the Black Press of America. And James, every time I mention that to someone, I feel like I have to put it in context, because 195 years ago, just the other day, we was observing Juneteenth, but 195 years ago, Black people were not free in this country, which gives you an idea of just how bold, just how brave, just how courageous the founders of the Black press was back in 1827 when they founded Freedom's Journal in New York. It's an amazing thing to just contemplate for a little while, that the Black press has gone from slavery. You think about Reconstruction, you think about Jim Crow, you think about the civil rights struggle, and then today, where white supremacy has just been the word of the day, really every day. It's particularly, we say since the Trump presidency, but we go back to Obama. And I know Dr. Chavis likes to say, and he's right, that it was a reaction to the Obama administration. But we saw people come out of the woodworks. The chickens have come home to roost, as Malcolm X said. They're out there. We had Charlottesville, that situation. Of course, the insurrection on January 6th, led by none other than a president of the United States of America. How much does that tell us how far this country still has to go?
Stacey, it tells us that we have a long way to go. I'll be honest with you. I was one of those Americans who was hoodwinked by the election of President Obama and his reelection. I was hoodwinked. I thought that maybe we have reached a point to where I won't say post-racial America, I'm not that naive, but at least a point that we can really sit down and start judging people based on their merits and not necessarily on their race. And apparently, a lot of people in 2016, such as myself, were proven wrong. There are a lot of Americans out there who have just some hatred of people of color. And I'm just calling it what it is. It's hatred of people of color. They fear the browning of America. They see people like Kamala Harris and Ketanji Brown Jackson, and they see people like Cory Booker, and you got attorney generals in states such as Regina James, and they're just getting angry and frustrated, and they don't know what to do. Well, what they need to do is to be civil, be a good Americans, and organize and put their people in there. Now, I think what needs to happen is that we need to have a racial reckoning here. Bill Clinton tried this in the late 1990s, and he had a lot of success, but it wasn't continued by George W. Bush because George W. Bush wasn't interested in those kind of things. But we really need to have a racial reckoning here. We need to bring America together, because the differences between the white person in Appalachia and the black person in Southeast really aren't that great. They're
Yeah.
both suffering economically. They're not wealthy. Many of them are on government assistance. And so, therefore, they should have common ground instead of being separated. But maybe that's the game in some higher elites in this country, to separate the poor whites and the blacks in order to continue their agenda. But getting back to what you're saying, we have a lot to do in terms of the racial reckoning of America, and this is what needs to happen. And I fell for the okey doke, but I won't do that again.
Well, James, a lot of people probably are saying the same thing that you're saying there. But we will, continue to see what this January 6th committee brings forth. It seems like they're bringing something forward every single day. And I tell you what, if I don't know what future aspirations Congressman Benny Thompson has, but if it's not for higher office, it should be for Attorney General, because he has done an incredible job. And the other thing is, the things that are coming out of that committee, generally we have so many leaks. It's not been that with this committee, which is important, isn't it?
Very important, because, as you know, Washington D.C. is a city of leakers, and pipes just burst all the time in this
All the
city.
time.
And so I think that as we watch this process, we can learn from this process. And perhaps Congressman Thompson can teach us something. He can teach us that we can do things civilly, and we can agree to disagree, and we are all Americans, and that's the most important thing. Also, I really wish that the conservatives on the Republican Party would participate in this. They don't have to agree with everything, but
Well,
there are some things that they need to agree with.
Well, and I think a key point though, James, is not to be overlooked. I think it's you should highlight the fact that what Benny Thompson has done here is the worst of the evidence, the most damning of the evidence has been brought forth by Republicans, have been brought forth from the Trump camp itself. These are individuals who probably fear prosecution themselves, and now they just want to spill, as they say. And good for them. They need to spill because they're wrong too. And I think that when it all comes out, as they say, it all comes out in the wash. When it does, not only should Trump go down, but everybody who propped him up, who helped him on this evil mission to destroy democracy in America, should go down with that ship.
Should go down. They should go down with the ship, and they should. I'll even go as far as to say to have their law licenses revoked, possibly not be able to run for elected office again. Those are constitutional questions. But here's the point: they must be punished for trying to undermine our democracy. I think, and you know, you like to reference to the fact that I'm a historian. I go back to the Civil War. After the Civil War, one of the greatest mistakes that President Andrew Johnson made, who succeeded Lincoln when he was assassinated, is not prosecuting the Confederate leaders of the Confederacy. They should have been prosecuted because they led an insurrection against the United States, but they were forgiven, and millions of people were tortured and lynched in a combination of that since that time. We can't do that anymore. Trump's people, he needs to be prosecuted. If sent to jail, then so be it. Rudolph Giuliani and Steve Bannon and all those others, they came against our country. And how can they wave American flags when they're trying to destroy the flag? So that is why they need to be prosecuted.
Well, the word you're looking for is hypocrite. That's what you're looking for, right? James, and speaking of hypocritical, let's move on. The Supreme Court made a key ruling yesterday. We expecting other rulings, including Roe v. Wade. But on the gun law, the Supreme Court uh, weighed in on a New York case in which a man was charged with given extra charges, put it that way, because of his use of a gun in an attempted robbery. Now, what the Supreme Court decided was that they could not, the prosecutor could not use aggravating circumstances just because there was a gun, among other things that they ruled. That's pretty interesting, given the climate, the gun climate that we're in now, the mass shootings. So it's really signaling, it seems to, let me put it that way, it seems to signal that when these cases of these shooters go before a court, we're not going to see the sentencings that we expect. In many cases, life sentences, and or harsher penalties for their actions. It seems like the Supreme Court is saying, well, you know what? So what? It was a gun involved.
We have to remember that the conservatives now control the Supreme Court. Many of these people believe that you have the right to carry a gun anywhere you want to without any restriction. That's why when this case came out, I was not surprised. I was kind of appalled, but I was not surprised. I think we have really, really butchered the Second Amendment. And we have used the Second Amendment, not when I say we, I mean as a people, to our own advantage when that was really not what it was designed for. In this particular case, I think that I think it's just that we're just such a gun culture now that
Right.
we're just willing to just say that this is just a regular part of our lives, and we just have to accept it that way. That is wrong. It is not. It is unusual. Guns should never be used to kill people. And I guess I'm a PETA supporter in terms of even killing deer and things like that. So hunting and that sort of thing. I just never got into hunting, but I just want to. I just, you know, this Supreme Court is going to really take America back. Now, we're not going to go back to the 1850s, but we may go back to the 1950s,
Hmm.
particularly with these gun laws in terms of when you were just free to carry a gun wherever you wanted to go. But here's the rub here. You have these stand laws where if
Right.
I'm afraid of you, you know, I can pull out my gun and shoot. You can do that in Florida.
Right. Stand your ground.
Yeah, stand your ground. And I'm afraid that this type of case will strengthen the reasoning for a judge to justify stand your ground because it reasons to say their reasoning it's okay to have a gun.
Well, it's troubling to say the least, but we're expecting even more controversial rulings this month before the month ends from the U.S. Supreme Court. So stay tuned, right? One other thing I wanted to bring up this morning, James. The NMPA, we covered both Bill Cosby's criminal trials. We did not cover his civil trial, but the verdict was reached yesterday. The jury found in favor of Judith Huth, $500,000 award they gave her. She was seeking at least $5 million, and then reportedly at least $5 million. It was sort of a mixed verdict, but in the sense, though, that they found that she was sexually assaulted by Bill Cosby in either 1974 or 1975. She can't make up her mind on that, but regardless, they found in her favor. We should mention that. What I found to be interesting, though, at the end of the trial, is his spokesman, Cosby's spokesman, said that Cosby was actually on the phone afterwards talking to the 3 jurors who was in favor of him. I don't know is that appropriate, James?
First, this whole thing against Bill Cosby, let me call it what it is. They want to get money from this man because he's a wealthy man. If that would have been me, they would have forgot about me a long time ago. So she got her little 1.6 million, whatever it is. This is what this is really about. And they're going to try to do to him what they did to O.J. Simpson. They're going to milk him down.
Well, we really went down the rabbit hole here, didn't we? He's talking about O.J. Simpson now.
We're in the same realm. We're in the same realm. And, I don't want to be one of these people, Stacey, to say that whenever a black man becomes successful, he becomes liable for whatever he did 20 or 30 years ago. I don't want to say that. And I certainly don't want to believe that. But it looks like this is what's happening.
But, James, the question is communicating with the jury afterwards, is that a problem at all? Do you find that to be problematic at all? James wants to talk about OJ. Yeah. OJ did it, James. He did it.
I know he did it. I know he did it. He knows he did it. I just keep thinking about, I shouldn't get off on this, Stacey, but I keep thinking about Al Weinstein.
Al Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah, him. Yeah,
Al is another guy.
Oh, Al's the other guy, the one down the street. But I just keep thinking about would he be going through this? And to your point about Bill Cosby, look, they're picking on Bill Cosby. And they started picking on Bill Cosby because he showed interest in buying NBC in the 1980s. Oops, did I say that? I shouldn't have. Look, that's really what this is about. Yeah. Right now, I don't know what he can do. He just has to defend himself as best as he can and pay out that money to those lawyers and do what he can.
Because in the end, that's who's getting the money, right? All the lawyers are getting the money. This $500,000 ruling was really a defeat in some ways for Judith Huth, because one report said that she spent, or at least the lawyers, it cost them probably 10, 11 times that amount to continue to bring this case against Bill Cosby. And, they come out with, $500,000, which probably barely covers her legal bills for this. So, look, the thing about it is these are decades old cases that continue to come up. She had for a long time claimed that this happened on the set of Let's Do It Again, or she met during the set of Let's Do It Again in 1975. But then when she took the stand, she said it was Uptown Saturday Night in 1974. But more importantly, when you are faced with these decades old allegations, how do you defend yourself? And even if you believe that Bill Cosby or anyone else committed some sort of crime, but to bring it 50 years later, how does he or anyone defend themselves?
Stacey, you say it was Uptown Saturday Night or Let's Do It Again. It might have been Leonard Part 6.
Well, no, it wasn't Leonard Part 6. That was the disaster in the 90s.
They can just make up these things all they want to do. How can he defend himself? I think legislation may be in order here.
Well,
In,
that was, but James, that's what happened here. There was a law in California that was passed with the intent. This was the intent of that law 2 years ago, to allow victims or alleged victims who get triggered by something to now extend the statute of limitations, which ran a long time ago. They have a year, and I think New York has now adopted that law as well. They have a year in which they've been triggered to file a lawsuit.
oh, these folks need to get over it, okay? You know, when I was in first grade in Miss Brown's class, I got a whooping because I was too long at the water fountain. Now, am I going to sue Miss Brown now
Why not?
because of that? It triggered that. It triggered me just a second ago.
It triggered
See,
you, right?
this is stuck on stupid.
Yeah.
This is stuck on. We need to enforce a statute of limitations on this sort of activity. And really, because
Well,
I
there
mean,
was a statute of limitations, as
well,
as we stated, and now there's new law. And Judith Huth's case, from what I understand, Cosby's release a year ago from prison triggered her, and so she was able to file this lawsuit. And it's been a year now since the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania declared that the trials of Bill Cosby were illegal, and they let him out of prison. And she said that triggered her, and so she was able to file this lawsuit.
this is the silliest thing I've ever heard of. And this is coming from California, and this is a California state law. Am I correct?
It's a
I just
California. Well, it's not just California now, that, as we said, and we are live. Yes, I'm fixing my earpieces. And this is what happens with live. When I worked at MSNBC, we did stuff like this too on live, and people were like, "What they doing?"
yeah,
So,
I just we need some kind of legislation somewhere in order to put a stop to this. Bill Cosby does not have a right to be harassed. People should not be harassed over what they did 20 years ago. That person could have brought that cause of action at that time that they chose not to. And just to say because of it brought up memories, now they can do that. Now I'm sure when the California General Assembly enacted that law, they were thinking something more serious than what
well,
this woman
I
did
think
in terms of Bill Cosby. I hope it was more serious than that.
James on a warpath, so we'll let that one rest.
Whew,
And let's talk
gosh.
about what's going on in New Orleans, James. This, again, we talked a little bit about it. This is fantastic because, again, you think about it, the 195th year of the Black Press. But James, you're on your way. What are you looking forward to most?
I'm looking forward to the panels on the various type of topics. I'm looking forward to interacting with publishers from around the country, getting a sense of what's going on in their community, how they're operating their papers in their community, how they're assuming leadership roles in their community. I'm also going to be listening very carefully to where are we going as a people? And this is the proper venue to do that.
Well, there's
You know,
one
the
panel.
NAACP is going to be meeting in Atlantic City in a few weeks, and I definitely want to stop by there. But this is where it needs to be at the NNPA because we are the communicators. We're communicating what our community needs and wants and desires. So we are the ones who should set the agenda, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Well, there is a panel about the antidote to racism. So there's one to look forward to, but there's plenty to look forward to. We're going to kick it off tonight. The chairman reception should be really nice to see everyone. I On the way here, when I stopped in Atlanta, I actually ran into our publisher from Atlanta, who is actually an NPA board member, Janice Ware, and her husband, another publisher, James Washington. And then to get here, James, we haven't seen each other in person in 3 years, right? Almost 3 years. And so this is in itself, that in itself, it makes it exciting. But all of the great things that are going on here, that will be going on here, I hope everybody who can will join us. All right. So I'm getting some instructions offline here. You want me to stand up? I'm told to stand up. All right. So here's what we're doing in New Orleans. We're gonna take a walk around, and so as you can see our set, James. And then when you come over here, this is iconic because you have all of the newspapers here, the black press, and this is what it's all about. You see the County News, the Wilmington Journal. You come up here, the Philadelphia Observer, which is a historic paper, which most of them are. The New Pittsburgh Courier is, there's no more legendary black newspaper than the New Pittsburgh Courier. The Michigan Chronicle, Real Times Media has several newspapers in the family, and the Michigan Chronicle being one of them. And of course, the historic Afro newspaper. You see all the headlines here, the New Journal and Guide. And the New Journal and Guide, a lot of people may not know this. Down in Virginia, the New Journal and Guide was the first to bring the story of hidden figures years and years before the movie, when people got to know those courageous black women. It was the New Journal and Guide who broke that story. And there's, you move on, the Arizona Informant. I saw Clovis Campbell, the publisher, last night. The Houston Forward-Times, which, of course, the chair, Karen Carter Richards, is the publisher of the Houston Forward-Times. And, you look at this, and what I'm looking forward to, too, Friday night, the red carpet will be out. And we'll have a who's who will be here to celebrate the black press. But over here is a social media cafe. So we really, really have it all. The plan is out. I have to give a lot of credit. Where's due, actually, the executive administrator of the NMPA, Claudette Perry.
Oh,
I mean, the
yes.
hard work, James,
Oof.
that she put into this, and is
Yes.
still putting into it. In fact, if you were watching earlier in the show this morning, we got a glimpse of her. She actually walked past. It's like the first time ever for her on Let It Be Known, and she'll know later. but this is what's just a taste of it. There's some staff people walking around, but we are here in the Big Easy, as they say, in New Orleans, the Black Press of America. Just join us. We're going to have a lot of tributes. The Vice President of the United States has sent in a tribute. So many others have sent in tributes. Rocky Buchanan, the Executive Director of the Hip Hop Museum. We got one from Kelly Rowland of Destiny's Child, and more. Deion Sanders will be awarded the Legacy Award on Friday night, along with Auntie Maxine, Representative Maxine Waters. Stephanie Mills will receive a Legacy Award and also perform. But it's so much more than that. As we said, the antidote to racism, so many panels that's going to enlighten and empower Black America. So stay tuned, and we will definitely bring you some more great stuff tomorrow right here from New Orleans. Thanks for joining Let It Be Known.